everyone. Did you know that over 70% of React developers use the provider pattern in their application? That's right. This pattern is essential for managing state and context, especially in complex applications. Today, we will not only dive into a more advanced example using the provider pattern, but we'll also set up a professional folder structure, use TypeScript, and again, please don't skim on the screen. TypeScript again is just JavaScript, and I'll keep it very simple. So I'm using TypeScript for strong typing and style our components with time in CSS. Ready to build it like a pro? Let's get started. Before we dive into the code, let's quickly recap what the provider pattern is. In React, this pattern helps us manage state across multiple components without passing props down through every single one, what we call prop drilling. Instead, we use a provider to make the state available to any component that needs it. Okay, now when we are working on larger projects, we having a clean and organized folder structure is very crucial, and this is the way we are going to do it. So I will go and create a components folder, okay, and I will create a context folder. So the component folder will hold all my components, and the context folder will hold the context for me that I'll be creating. And I'll add one more folder which is for types. Great. Now let's start writing some code. So first thing, because I'm using TypeScript, I need this types folder to put my types in. So what I will do, I'll create a new file which called user.ts. Okay, so I need to be centralized because I will need this interface or this type in many files in my project. So I want to place it in one file and make it available. So export interface, and I will call it user, and usually I just add I in the end so I have understanding the difference between an actual component I'm exporting and actual interface I'm exporting. So the user will have an ID which should be of type number, and will have of course the name of my user, and it will be type of string, and also I want to have an email as well, and that will be type of string. Great. Now we have done with our types. Let's go and create our context, which will handle my user state and details and make it available for me to all other components. So what I will do, I will go inside my context. I'll create a new file which called user context. Again, you can call these files anything you like, but it is recommended to keep this context keyword in your namings, so when you're importing them and using them, it makes sense for you what is that file for. So, first thing we'll start doing is importing React. And then also I need to import create context from React as well, which will help me to create my context. Again, if you're not familiar with context and context API, I have full video detailed and explain exactly what is context API in React. Okay, now I'm importing create context from React, which helped me to create my context, which is this bucket, will hold all these details and informations for me that I will need later in other parts of my application. And I will need to use context, which helped me to consume this context I created. And inside my context, I will need a state, so I'll use state, okay? And I will come down here now and import my type I created before, which is user I. And now I'll come here, and what I will do is that I will start creating my context. So first I'll say const, and I'll call it user context. So a meaningful name, it will be create context. And because I'm using TypeScript, I need to give it a type, okay? And if you're using JavaScript, you don't need to do this. So I need to define basically a type. So I'll come right here. I'll call interface, and I'll call it user context type, for example, and I would expect to have a user, which should be of type user or null. And you have to do this or null because, sorry, this one is user I. And you have to do the null because the first time when you're running your context, you're creating it, it will not have anything in it. So you have to manage that that scenario as well. Okay, and I will need also a function that I'll need later also in my context. So I'll define that as well, which is called set user, which will help me to set up my user details. And that will be react dot dispatch. Okay, again here I'm just defining the type, and to with type react dot set state action. Okay, and it will be setting the type user I or not. And don't worry if this is overwhelming. As we start creating our context, it will make much more sense to you. And I will close this as well. Now I'll come back here and pass this type. So my context or the bucket I'm creating, it will be with this type, and this is the things it will have inside. Okay, or it will be undefined. And again, because first time we're creating this bucket, we are creating the bucket to be empty, to not have anything. Okay, and I'm passing by default and define. Nice. So now I create my bucket. Let's create my provider, which will make this bucket available for me to my application. So export const, I'll call it user provider. You can call again anything you want. And this will be of type React. Again, if you're using JavaScript, you don't have to do this. So React functional component, and it will accept an argument, or it will accept some props, and the prop will be children by default, which will be the children components we are passing. And this children, of course, if type of React dot React node. Okay, so it will be type of React, it will be a component. I will close this, and here I just lost a C, so I have to edit it right there. Okay, and we will be saying this is equal, and of course I have to define the props I'm passing, which will be children, and then let's have our return. So inside I'll define the state I need, so I need a state of user. Okay, and set user, which helps me to set the user details, and that will be coming from our use state. Okay, and the use state will be of type. Again, if you're using JavaScript, you don't need it to do this type. So type of user, oops, user I or none, and the default value we will have at the start is a null. Great, now we come to our return. So what will be returning? So what will be returning this user context that we created, which is our bucket here. Okay, and we can access something called provider, and inside this provider it have a property called value, and this value basically you can pass anything that you want your child components to have access to. Okay, in my child components I want to have access to both user, my user details, and also the setup function I have right there. Okay, so I'll make them both available to my child components. And inside, of course, we'll be displaying our children. Children. Me and my spellings. Okay, that's the children. And here is complaint saying, can't find it. You mean, oh, I did another spelling somewhere. Damn it. Here we go. Children. Good. So we created our bucket. We create the provider that will make this bucket available to us. Now, next thing is I'll create a hook. Okay, and usually we do this one also in separate file. So what I will do actually, I'll create a new folder which called hooks, and inside there I will create my hook, which is use, and always your hook starts with use keyword, and also use user.ts. And here what I will do, I'll just export const, okay? I'll say use user, and it doesn't accept any props. Oops, here you need equal. And what I will do, I need to import the context, import React, of course, and also import use context, okay? So I can use the context I created. And down here, I have to import the user context that I created. One moment, let me see. Oh, I didn't make it available, so I have to make it available to my project. So I have to do export here. Good. So I'll come here. I'll say user context. And what I will do inside my hook right here, I will just go and create an instance called const context. You can call it anything you like. And then I will say use context, and I'll be using the context I created, which is user context. Okay. Now, I want to do some check here, okay? So if someone try to access this context outside of this provider, that context will not exist, okay? So I have to handle that. So I'll say if context does not exist, then throw some error. You can do any error management you want, or what I will do for me now, just throw an error. I'll say use user must be used within a user provider. Okay, otherwise I'm just returning my context. Okay, very nice. So up to now what we have done is that we created our user context and the user provider, and notice how we also included this custom hook, which is the use user. So it makes it for us easy to consume this context in our actual components. Okay, now, let's go and actually start creating these components. So I want to have a dashboard, a user dashboard. So I want to have a section which called profile and another section which calls settings. Okay. So what I will do, I'll go inside here. I'll call a folder called profile, and I'll create my component there, which called index.tsx. Okay. And what I will do here, I will import React from React, of course, and then I'll import my hook that I created here. Okay, so import my use user hook. Great. Now let's create our component. So const profile, and that will be of type react.fc, so functional component. It doesn't accept any props, and because we are using this context API to avoid any props trailing, so it have access actually immediately to your context. So we can do const and we say user equal use user. Okay, and this user is the one we make it available right there. Okay, and this we pass to the value, so that's the name we are from where we are getting this user. So that's how you can access your context, and then in the return I'll just paste some code very quickly so you don't see me typing boring things. So all what we are doing here, basically we are checking the user. If it does exist, then I'm displaying the name, the email, and then if it doesn't exist, I'm just saying no user data is available. Let's create the settings, and we'll call settings, and I'll create my components called index.tsx. Okay, now these settings will be a little bit different, and here we'll be setting up our user. Okay, so what I will do, I just quickly paste some code here. This part is wrong, so I'll just fix that, and I'll say context slash user context. Okay, and And actually, I will have to delete that lane because I create a different folder for the hook. So I'll say import use user from my hook folder. Okay, so what I did basically here, I created a component which called settings, and all what it does for me is that it display a title, then it has a button. Okay, and that button, it says update user details, and when you click it, it trigger a function. And this function at the moment, we don't have any forms because it's not the purpose of this video. So I'm just mocking the details. So whenever you click this update user, we are triggering the set user right here that is coming from our hook, which is coming from our context provider from this lane here. Okay. And this is the way we make it available for us. So whenever someone click that button, we're just updating the user details. So the assumption is when you do that, you should see this updated details in the other component, which is accessing the user details. Okay. Now this is good. So we created our profile component, we created our settings component. Now it's time to put all these things together and assemble them. So we will go to the entry page, which is my page.csx, because I'm using Next.js. I'll remove all this stuff from here. And all what I will do is I will just import this component that I created. So import profile from component slash profile, and also I will import my settings, oops, from my component slash settings. Now we created this component, okay, and I can just come here and do profile and also do settings, but this will not work. And let me first check why this one is complaining. I think I did some mistake here. Yeah, I didn't export this, so export default profile. Let's go back to our page. So I imported my components, but I missed one huge step here, okay? So I have to wrap these two with that provider we created in our context. So let me close this. So this provider. So I have to import that provider as well. And make sure your components are wrapped within that provider. Otherwise, your context will not work. And we can actually try to give it a run and see what error we will get right there. We say npm run dev, so you can see the issue first, and then we will try to fix it together. And there we go, our UI is complaining. It's a your important component that needs create context. It only work in client components, but I'm spared. So this is actually another issue we're facing here because I'm using Next.js. By default, they are server side. So I need to go here and make sure they are client side. So just say in the parent itself, use client. And let's save this. And now we have another problem. So it says use user must be used within a user provider. And that's the error we add here, use user. So that's the error we add right there, okay? So let's go fix this. Let's use user provider, okay? We should import it as well. And then we'll put our components inside. And also what I will do, I will just add actually some styling here. Okay, so what I will do is just remove all this so it just looks more friendly. And there we go. So this is our user dashboard, right? Which is the title right there. And then we have our two components, the user profile and the settings component. And you can see because initially we don't have any details, it says no user data is available. Now let's go and hit this button, and there we go, boom, immediately it's updated. So you can see these two components are like siblings component, right? But still they can talk to each other without having to set any state in the main parent component and then pass them down and up and update them, which cause a lot of performance issues and also the prop drilling problem as well. This is how you set up your React application with this provider pattern. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Have you tried using the provider pattern with TypeScript and Time CS in your project? What does your folder structure looks like? Let me know in the comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out my other videos for more React tips and tricks. Thank you for watching and happy coding.